I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with the cattle market summary for the week ending July the 19th, brought to you in part by National Beef Wire. Our spotlight today is the Cattle on Feed report, brought to you by Zactran. Please take a moment to check out Zactran's channel number 156 on the nationalbeefwire.com, where we've seen the rise and fall of your feeder cattle, even your green grass yearlings, or especially them guys, this past week. We came in early in the week, still with some drive from last week's market and the previous week's market, and some of your early week auctions had not caught up with that yet, so they were still on the rise. Things were going pretty good. Your board didn't do a heck of a lot of anything on Monday, so you were still seeing a little bit of direct trade happen at the prices that we saw the previous week. But by the time we got into the meat of this week, and your board lent no support, and then we saw the reports that the heat was coming, and then we saw that the fat cattle market was going to give up $1 or so, then your feeder cattle went back down. And your green grass yearlings that everybody wants, of course the demand's still there for them, but they won't quite give what they would have give the end of the previous week, or even maybe on Monday of this past week. But I'll give you a little bit of a talk. I know everybody kind of wants to know what's going on out in the Flint Hills and the Osage, up through the plains. Your double stock pastures are coming off right now. A lot of those are already delivering. They've delivered a lot of them already, so you can't really expect to see a whole lot more drive on this green grass yearling market, because the feedlots that are really pushing for them are already starting to get big loads of them in almost every morning. So with those coming in, it doesn't behoove them to really push the market a whole lot more than they've already pushed it. They probably give all they're going to give, and now they've backed off of that a little bit. So the market came to those guys that had the grass yearlings quite a bit, but now it's starting, and they can't quite grasp the high of the market, which is about a week or 10 days old. Now some of your auctions will still get that. Of course, your weigh up's a little better in the auctions, and if the conditions there and the quality too, your auctions may still get that price that you could have got at the extreme top in the country, but not going to do it. But I'm going to give you some quotes from a lot of contacts that I have out in the country that are telling me what the cattle are kind of bringing, and we'll compare what you could have got maybe a week or 10 days ago, but you can't get that anymore. But don't try to compare these with what USDA is quoting for direct sales in the country. I'm not sure where they're getting that, because they're way under anything that's actually happening out there. The cattle are either very, very plain, or the quotes are off or something. But you can't expect those independent feedlots to turn those prices in at what they really are, knowing that they'll go into the index and likely raise it. So they're just going to give you the low balls and the cheap stuff. And if you guys don't believe that, look at those direct feeder cattle reports with USDA. All they have is index cattle. Very rarely do you ever see calves or heifers, so they're just giving what they want to give. But what's really going on out there on the good cattle in the Flint Hills, in the Osage, moving up towards Nebraska there, in your double stock pastures though, that are shipping right now and will until the end of the month here. But an 800-pound steer, a flat 800-pound steer, a lot of times they'll slide them at 775, might have tickled 150, 148, 149, maybe tickled 150, but you can't get that anymore. They backed off of that. So that's even on the best one, so they won't quite bring that anymore. An 850 pounder, if you got, and the quality's making a difference now guys, we're right at splitting hairs right now. If you've got all black northern quality type cattle, some that'll hit some marks on a grid, get some premiums, things like that, you could get 145 at 850. but that's kind of out of reach right now. So likely 143, maybe 144 if you're lucky. I heard of a real fancy deal that happened at the meat of the quotes at 146, a long string of them, but that 145 kind of unattainable. Maybe 143, maybe 144 if you know the buyer and you've been really loyal to him over the years. 900 pounders at 140. And at the extreme top, maybe the middle of the previous week, you might have got 142 or 3 for those 900 pounders. But they won't do it now, and it's come off more on the heavier cattle. So $140 you may or may not be able to get, but that's on the good cattle that are turned out there that are still available to sell. Going to your top feedlots out there, not some of this lowball stuff that you see quoted on some of your other reports, but that's what's really happening out there from real guys that are out there active and have been the last several weeks in the country in the major grazing areas. Let's talk about your board for the week. August live cattle futures Monday was up 2 cents. It really didn't do anything Monday, but up 2 on the close. Tuesday was down 27, Wednesday down a dime, Thursday down 72 cents. Just no support anywhere there. Friday, a little bit of profit taking, back up 20 cents, but 107.60 for your August live cattle futures to settle at the end of the week. That was down 87 cents for the week. October ended at 108.50. It was down $1.47 for the week. Look at your feeder cattle. August feeder cattle. Monday was up a nickel. It barely did anything anywhere also on Monday. Tuesday started to drift, down 60. Wednesday down 47. Thursday down $1.15. Friday back up 55 cents. All this happened before the cattle on feed report came out, but 139.97 at the end of the week for August feeder cattle. That was down $1.63 for the week. September ended at 139.80, down $2.75 for the week. Now your grains did back up a little bit more. December corn ended the week at 435 3/4, down 23.5 for the week. November beans, even though they were up 20 cents on Friday, they ended the week at 919 1/4, down 12 1/4 cents for the week. Your fat cattle trade, we talked about that. We saw it jump up the previous week, and we're glad to get it. Didn't know if they were ever going to be able to gain $1, but they gained some ground there the previous week. Come in this week probably thinking that we could hold at least steady or maybe gain a little bit more ground, but nobody was prepared for how hot it was going to get. I mean, extremely hot and sultry. Some of those index levels getting up in the teens, and some of the worst of them in places like Iowa, over in eastern Nebraska, some places where you have a lot of feedlots. Those cattle just have never had to put up with heat like that. So this is the first time for them, and especially those big, heavy, market-ready cattle, those things are just going to melt on you. So we had that pressuring. Then we had this big basis out there with your August live cattle contract sitting there about $1.08, ended at 107.60 at the end of the week. But that's a nice basis for those hedged feeders there too. So a little reason to hope that we'd get any better, and we lost a little bit of ground. But we had about 73,400 head through Thursday. Not a whole lot of trade reported on Friday, so pretty much done for last week. We'll talk about it on our next visit, what we finished up with the roundup. But your weighted average in the 5-area feeding region on live steers was right around 113. It's not going to change much more than that. That was down about $1.60. Your dress sales, the average in the 5-area feeding region, right around steady, and that's not going to change a lot either. But the Southern Plains market was 111. Texas and Kansas, absolutely 111. Nebraska was mostly 113, but Iowa continuing to sell at a premium because there's not a lot of those real high quality premium type carcasses out there, and the Iowa farmer feeders have some of those. They sold some cattle as high as 116. So when you blended those in there, it all come out to about 113. Box beef cutout values are supposed to be falling like a rock as we're getting well into your dog days of summer, but they're not drifting all that bad. Your average trade for last week on choice cuts 213.11. That was $1.53 lower than the average from the previous week. Selects 188.97. The weighted average there was off $2.59 from the previous week. Big choice select spread of $24.14. And a big movement, 718 loads of cuts, grinds, and trimmings. We're not seeing as much. Of course, we're slaughtering all those calf feds. Didn't perform all that well. Kind of had a rough time in the feedlot. They're not grading the best. We feel like they recalibrated some of these cameras because we're not seeing as many choice and high choice and prime carcasses as we were seeing before. They're not going to tell you a whole lot about that, or somebody may look in to how big of a problem it actually was. But not a lot of primes out there, and some of these guys that feed for quality were getting to where they were just expecting a high percentage of primes, where those of us that have been following the grading for 20 or 25 years, we always thought that prime was just kind of a fluke of nature, but it hasn't been here since they put in those camera grading tools. But your slaughter for last week, 651,000. That's 4,000 less than the previous week, but 16,000 more than the same week a year ago. Let's talk about your cattle on feed report. Your analysts notched it. So good job on them. They absolutely notched it. Even the placements, and there was a big wide spread on your placements, and guys that I talked to, depending on where they lived in the country, I had guys saying that it was going to be way more than that, and I had guys I talked to that thought it was going to be way less than that, and I guess it kind of worked out because it come right in where they had predicted it would be. But your July 1st inventories on feed, 102% of a year ago. That's the third month in a row that it's the largest for that month since the data series began. And if you guys know what I think about that, it's always something's bigger than the data series ever was. But that data series started in 1996. Yeah, a lot of cattle on feed. We thought that a lot of these cattle would be hitting the market right now. And we thought if we could get over that hump, then we had something to look forward to. Now we've kind of lost our up market, but it's been because the up market was because the Northern Plains were short of market ready cattle. We didn't think enough about looking back 150 days and seeing the dreaded misery that those guys were in, and then knowing that they were feeding mostly calves. It was going to take longer for those to hit the market. Now we're thinking we're going to have a lot of cattle that are ready as we get into September and right in there in the fall of the year. So we'll see how we get through that. But I would think by the time we get to the end of the year, we'll be back on the upswing of things. But your placements of feeder cattle in June, 98%. That's exactly what they thought it would be. Your marketing's 97%, just how the days worked out. That's exactly how they thought it would be. So that's good. There's a couple of things that you could look at in the cattle on feed report. Your heifers on feed, heifers and heifer calves on feed, up 8% over the same report a year ago. Your heifer slaughter year to date has been up 7.7%. And last year, your heifer slaughter was up about that much or close to it from the previous year. So you got to know that our numbers are really going to start tapering off here in a hurry. We've been killing a lot of beef cows, and we haven't been keeping any heifers back, guys. And then if you believe that we lost more of those calves in the storms over the early spring time, then it could be even worse than that. But I was prepared for your cattle inventory to come out here middle of the year and say that we were still continuing to build the herds, and I was calling bullshit on that. And this report would have been a whole lot more interesting if they had said that we were growing and they were actually, your expectations were to say that it was going to be like 0.5% bigger on our calf crop still, even though those of us that watch it know that we have not. But got to give them credit. The inventory, total inventory, was just about the same as last year. At the same time here, we always get that mid-year inventory, but they did say that the calf crop for 2019 slightly less than 2018. So herd rebuilding is even officially over, even though we all knew that it was over. Now it's officially over. Now we can start looking forward to some brighter things on the supply side. Let's talk about your feeder cattle market. Your real-time index on Cattle Market Central ended the week at 138.96, down $2.22 from the end of the previous week. If you think that 138.96 is sticking close to your CME cash feeder cattle index, the latest we have on it is for Thursday, and it was 138.67. So just within pennies, guys. But you're getting that information so much real time and fresher than what you get the other. Cash feeders in your sale barns, like I said earlier, they started the week kind of on the upswing from a big gains mid to late week the previous week, and some of your Monday sales had not caught up with that. So they were higher on Monday, but then once we got to those sales that saw the big rise the previous week, they started to taper off, and in spots quite a bit. But for the most part, your feeder cattle $1 to $3 lower. Your calves not well tested in the plains and in the Midwest, but in places where they were and in the Southeast, sure $3 to $5 lower, and that's all about the heat too. Especially these new crop calves that aren't weaned right off the cow. You do not want to be moving those things around and pulling them, weaning them on the trailer in these kind of heat conditions. But your grass yearling feeder cattle prices are just about $10 lower than they were last year at this time, if you think back. But your fat cattle trade is just about exactly the same. I want to give you a few individual quotes. They had a good sale on Friday at the Bluegrass Stockyards in Richmond, Kentucky. Selling those yearlings out there this time of year. You can still take those crossbred yearlings that are further east, and some of those that don't have so much hair, you can still take them to the northern feedlot areas, guys. They will be done before the temperatures get terrible cold, and if it starts to get chilly there sometime in the fall, they're going to be acclimated to it by then. But those cattle are out there are bringing just about as much as they are anywhere. And at Bluegrass Stockyards in Richmond on Friday, they had 54 head load, weighed 924 pounds there, bring 136.75. You tack the freight on them to get them to the feedlot areas, and I tell you what, that is one heck of a sale there. But the top quote we saw on grass feeders was in Mankato, Kansas there, a little bit north there and west of your major Flint Hill area, but still good quote there. And like I said, in some of these sales that we see right around this time, we're going to see a little bit higher quotes than we see in the country, mainly because you're way up and the cattle are sorted for them and everything's right there with a bow tied around them in the sale. But at Mankato, 117 head string of steers weighed 896 right off the grass at 143. That's a look at your week's markets back in the Lone Star State, headed back to home here after a 2.5 week trip. But that's a look at your markets for the week from DV Auction, and we'll talk to you next week.